I'm sorry, you're fired. Get out of here. Right?
We know that David Cochrane from the CBC does not like any of the conservatives, gives them a really hard time. Polyev especially, always taking pot shots, but he has a different sort of contempt and loathing for Donald Trump. I haven't seen this yet. We're going to watch it right now. It just popped in, and boy, oh boy, I bet you he is going to try to rip Trump a new one. David Cochrane, go for it. You're a fool. Let's take a peek.
Well, President Donald Trump initially wouldn't talk about his decision to end trade talks with Canada.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, sir. On the subject, sir.
Not Canada. This is about Canada.
Why not? Why not Canada, by the way?
Why?
I mean,
because this is about a different subject right now. This is right now actually a much more important subject. We just ended a war that was going on for 30 years where 6 million people died. So don't ask me a trade question on Canada.
Okay, that didn't last. Speaking last hour from the Oval Office, Trump eventually took a question about Canada. Have a listen to this.
We have all the cards. We have every single one. We don't want to do anything bad, but they have, economically, we have such power over Canada. I'd rather not use it, but they did something with our tech companies today trying to copy Europe. You know, they copied Europe. It's not going to work out well for Europe either, and it's not going to work out well for Canada.
So as of right now, Trump says trade talks are off because of Canada's digital services tax, which takes effect this Monday. It's a tax on foreign tech companies. And this afternoon, Trump posted this, writing in part, based on this egregious tax, we are hereby terminating all discussions on trade with Canada effective immediately. We will let Canada know the tariff that they will be paying to do business with the United States of America within the next 7-day period. The U.S. has known about the digital services tax for well over a year now, so what happened? We're going to talk about all of this with our political insiders. James Moore is with us this week. He's, of course, a former Conservative cabinet minister. Fred is away, and here with me in the studio, Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor, and Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. James, we have a long tradition on this Friday panel of curveballs, many of them coming from the United States of America, blowing up the plan. So welcome to that. What is your reaction to what Donald Trump had to say and what the response has been from Canada so far?
I always tried to live by the motto of always respond, never react, go slow. And it looks like Prime Minister Carney and the video clip that I saw of him when he was asked about this by the media, he has that sort of dispassionate view. Who knows? On one day, he's condemning Israel for their attacks on Iran. The next day, the B-2 bombers are leaving from Missouri to do a strategic airstrike. And then the day after that, he's yelling at Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone. Who knows? What I do know is that this policy is nothing new. And in the tweet that was on, or whatever it is, the message that was on Truth Social by President Trump, he mentioned two things, right? He mentioned the digital services tax. He also mentioned supply management. It was factually not true, but these are not new issues or new grievances. The fact that it comes on a Friday afternoon is interesting. Obviously, the tax was set to come in early next week. But, you know, this is a challenge for Canada because there are constituencies in the country who support this tax. There are some people who think that this it does create a global level playing field, but there are a lot of voices in Canada, in the business community, in the creative community, who have a lot of problems with the digital services tax and what it means in terms of limiting voices on Facebook and social platforms, and it has really hurt local news in the country. So this is a spillover from C11, C18, digital services tax, and a broad policy that Prime Minister Trudeau put in place that Prime Minister Carney now has inherited. And so there may be now a reevaluation of all these things in the days going forward, because, you know, the President Trump has got a pretty jaundiced view of Canada's cultural policies, broadly speaking. And this is a particular peak that President Trump has found, and for which there's frankly a pretty large Canadian audience that agrees with him. Right, and well, on the other side of it, Mel, though, we did see the Premier of Quebec, François Legault, today saying, you know, the digital services tax is important for, you know, cultural industries, but also the tariffs are a very difficult thing, hoping there can be a resolution. But I wonder, here we are, 11, 12, 13 days into the 30 days, and the President says it's over. I mean, what do you make of it?
Well, I feel like there's been a few times where we've been sitting around this table where we kind of say,
Who knows?
I don't really know. And you know, like we're laughing. It's not funny, but it is. You have to laugh because otherwise I really don't really have a lot of answers for how we're supposed to deal with a president who, you know, to James's point, knew about this. This is not something new. So for it to come on a Friday afternoon, it feels like more of the same of the undermining of our sovereignty, of the undermining of the relationship. And the Prime Minister has done a really good job so far in maintaining those open doors with the president. But every time we see those messages, you know, particularly on Friday, you can't help but think, how are you supposed to have a stable relationship with the country? How are you supposed to have a stable relationship with the president who changes his mind so often or who throws these shots so often? And I think folks...
How about if we have a prime minister that's always lying and he's corrupt and he's always deceiving people, delaying, distracting? There's no budget and he hasn't revealed his sources of income. Give me a break. These people
are getting a little bit desensitized over it, like they're not sure how to proceed or how to move forward as it relates to the digital services tax. I think a lot of people in this country think that if you do business here, you should be paying taxes here. They pay their fair share of taxes and they expect the businesses that are here to be doing the same. So I do think that I take the point of a lot of businesses being against this, but for a lot of regular folks, I think the sentiment there is that this is something that makes sense. So I think there would be support for the Prime Minister to kind of hold steady on this. What that looks like over the next few days as we go into Monday, obviously, is interesting, but yeah, I feel like hard to say is always the response to these questions.
Yeah, the laugh is almost out of exasperation, right? Because there's like a personal injury law flavor to a lot of this. And you know, Greg, I just wonder, we you know, James pointed to the clip of the Prime Minister. You know, he left the PMO and went out very calm. This is a negotiation. We're going to keep working on, you know, the best deal for Canada. No conversations, leaks, briefings, anything on what is actually happening behind the scenes. A very disciplined, buttoned-up kind of shop that, you know, Jean Charest and Flavio Volpe both said it looked like it was going okay.
Yeah.
Then it wasn't. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it was funny. I thought this might come up ahead of the G7 because I heard a lot of talk about this is a retroactive payment and it goes back, I believe, to January of 22. Yeah. And also, you know, the president saying that he just learned of this. Well, yeah, it got royal assent in 2024, but I believe this was a 2019 election promise, and it was mentioned in the fall economic statement of 2020. And there's no way that, you know, American officials were unaware of this. I think the election in the United States might have had something to do with how it was handled because the Biden administration kind of dropped their pursuit of this around the same time of the election. But, you know, you start with the president not knowing or saying that he's just learned of this. And I recall, I think it was at the end of January where there was a very dramatic Oval Office moment. And I was standing in the hallway waiting to come on, and someone from the then Prime Minister's office said, do reporters think that the Prime Minister may come out tonight? And I said, definitely. And they said, it's not going to happen until we get it in writing. Right. And, you know, we were able to kind of cover that, so people got to go home on a Friday night. But that's a good policy until, you know, other than what I don't think I've ever...
This is one of the tariff measures or whatever it was.
I don't think I've ever seen Truth Social on Truth Social. I think I see a screen capture on other platforms. So, it could exist. I'm not sure. But I think that's, you know, the proper way to go.
Right. So on this issue of we just learned of it, as the president says, well, his Treasury Secretary was on CNBC late this afternoon to discuss collapse in trade talks. I don't know if collapse is the right word, but whatever status it is in. And Scott Bessent admitted that the Trump administration has long known about the digital services tax, but thought that since it was from the Justin Trudeau era, that Prime Minister Mark Carney would take care of it for them. Have a listen to this.
We were hoping as a sign of goodwill that the new Carney administration would at least put a break on that during the trade talks. They seem not to have. President Trump has responded, and my inclination is that Ambassador Greer over at USTR will be starting a 301 investigation into the digital services taxes to determine the amount of harm to the U.S. companies and the U.S. economy in general.
James, I wonder what you make of that. That there's this strange the commentary you hear from the American officials is almost like they just say, oh, Canada should do this for us. You know, like, oh, it's a sign of goodwill, put a brake on this, give it to us. You're killing steel jobs, you're threatening aluminum jobs, auto jobs are lost or on hold by the thousands, but they kind of expected as a sign of goodwill, Canada would just drop this before actually getting a concession back from the United States.
There's nothing, by the way, on the other side of this, there's nothing magical about the digital services tax in terms of what it means as a benefit for Canadian creators and their market audience. There's nothing that stops the government of Canada from creating other tools and other opportunities to support Canada's creative sector that would mean that you have to have in place a digital services tax. There are other ways of doing this. And that Premier Charest's suggestion in your previous segment there was an eloquent one. Right, which would be to say that we're going to have a timeout or a pause in the digital services tax, and we're going to shelve the policy for, say, a calendar year while we re-examine policies that would be aligned with a renewed Canada-U.S. free trade agreement, so that our policies are aligned in a way to support the creative communities and ensure that there is parity between our countries and full access to each other's marketplaces and the rest of the world. There are things that you can do that would be beneficial. Canada and Prime Minister Carney, including from the carbon tax and a lot of policies, he has divorced himself from a lot of policies from the Trudeau era that he views as being accretive to Canada's economy and forward lean and forward benefit. There's nothing to say that the digital services tax, we couldn't take a time out on it and shelve a lot of these policies, maybe not permanently, but certainly until we get not just past the tariff fight, right, but through the CUSMA renegotiations, and then put them back on the table in terms of what is the balance of policies we want to have in Canada relative to the benefit that we would have of tariff-free market access to the U.S. economy. I think that's probably a more sweeping, thorough approach to public policy that the country needs.
But James, don't you think you'd need to get something in return for doing that at this point in time? You know, if you were going to, knock off $3 billion of retroactive tax payments and $1 billion a year going forward, then the auto tariffs have to go away, the steel tariffs have to go away. Something has to give, because right now it's all take.
Steel, aluminum, steel, aluminum, auto. I mean, lumber. Twice as many people work in the lumber industry than work in steel and aluminum combined. The steel and aluminum are being attacked uniquely by President Trump. But you could say extend a no tariff policy, and we will not bring in this new policy and implement it until we get to the CUSMA renegotiations scheduled for calendar 26. Meanwhile, we will continue to have conversations about the broader trading relationship. Right. That would be an elegant and responsible public policy approach. But you have to have two people at the table who are interested in elegant and responsible public policy at the table.
A lot of words get thrown around in this. Elegant is rarely used. Mel, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, from the Canadian side, it seems like I think James and Mr. Charest, they have way more experience with this stuff than I do. But there are ways to use the pause button to get you to a solution, but you do need a sweetener here, right?
Totally. You need to be able to meet in the middle and find a path forward. Folks here are hurting, particularly in the steel and aluminum industries, and that hurt is not going away anytime soon. So to your point, to take something off the table without anything in return, and when outbursts like this happen on the regular, it's hard. It's a hard sell. The other thing that I just can't help but talk about, the imagery of this week. I don't know what social platforms you live on. I live on Instagram, and I've just been bombarded by the Bezos wedding in Italy this week and how it's going to cost up to $56 billion. And I don't know who in my universe is like, yeah, that man should not be paying taxes in Canada. So, and I would say New Democrats, Liberals, and Conservatives that I'm friends with would agree that maybe he's got too much money. But that imagery of that as this conversation is happening, and again, there are no concessions. There are no, okay, we're going to play nice here. It's, we expect you to drop everything. We expect you to do everything that we want you to do. And again, to James' point, we threw the first punch. They
threw the first punch. Yeah.
Yes. They threw the first punch. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell to people right now, and it's hard to see how you take that off the table without being given something. But again, you're not really dealing with somebody who's reasonable.
Yeah, and Greg, there is a innocent bystander component to this, you know, for the Canadian economy in some ways. You're standing around minding your own business, broadly playing by the rules. And, you know, the battering of your certainty, of your wallet, of your savings, of your employment, it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming. I just don't see how you can give any kind of a broad concession to the president right now, like while the 30-day window and the July 21st counter tariff deadline are still there.
Yeah, and you know, the Secretary's comments, it does beg the question, well, did you have this conversation with the new Prime Minister? You know, why are you doing it via American television? You know, full disclosure, I did work for a streaming service for a long time, and I don't want to conflate some of the issues, but James has mentioned, you know, the creative industries in Canada, and you know, I understand because they spend a lot of money in Canada, and there are a lot of spin-offs from that. But also, I understand, you know, if a ride-sharing app is making money and they're making money off Canadians, and we're looking at other jurisdictions that have a DST and they're doing that, of course, it lines up that we're going to do this. But, you know, just to kind of mess it up even a bit further, this is not to say that some U.S. states would not also introduce a DST. New York State at one point was, I don't know currently, but at one point they were talking about a 4% DST. So I feel like the president has kind of, surprise, come to this lately, and I think we need to kind of, you know, wait until we actually, as I said in the, you know, previously, let's see what actually what they're going to be negotiating with or on. If there's a pause, I don't think people will be, it's been backdated for quite a while. I don't think another pause is going to be horrendous.
Yeah, you know, these digital giants, I mean, they have more power than some countries and some nation states and pay very little tax, even in the countries where they are, because of the way the U.S. tax system is structured. Like, you know, Bezos can do these weddings because he can get around paying a lot of things by just not realizing the wealth. But, you know, whatever the implications of what the...
All right, gang, we're going to stick a fork in that. My goodness, like, it's supposed to be a news station or a station that revolves around journalism. You know that's not what you just saw. I'll give credit to James Moore. He tried, but I have no idea why he would go on that show, because you don't get a chance to make a rational point. Where were any of the questions about, did Mark Carney say to Trump that he wouldn't impose this tax retroactively, and then last minute he tried to sneak it in? Where was that question? Like, I did go to school for journalism. It was a long time ago, but I have a diploma in broadcast journalism, television production, and I know what journalism is. I know what it's not. That's not journalism. Anyhow, what are you gonna do? David Cochran is a schmuck. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think about the CBC, that panel, especially the ones in studio, and why do they always wrap up with the liberal critic? Like, or the liberal, it's not a critic, that's what they call it, but it's not a critic. It's propaganda, gang. What are we gonna do? Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe, get notified. We'll catch you in the next video. We're out. Take care.
I'm sorry, you're fired. Get out of here. Right?
What?
Oh, yeah.